Happy International Women's Month. With all that being said, I felt the right to examine women in Islam since I have been told by very prominent Muslim figures and leaders that Islam empowers and uplifts women and that no one treated women better than Muhammad. However, when I looked at the Quran and the Muslim sources, they seem to have told a much different story. First off, the Quran and the Hadiths have a very low opinion of women in general. In chapter 2, verse 282 of the Quran, it says that if there are not two men available, then a man and two women from those whom you accept as witnesses, so that if one of them errs, then the other can remind her. Now, you're probably wondering why there needs to be two women, but there doesn't need to be two men. Well, that's because Muhammad said in Sahih al-Bukhari 2658 that it was because of the deficiency of a woman's mind. Yikes. But it gets even worse. So, he also says in Sahih Muslim 79a that because of the fact that two women equals one man, they lack common sense. Muhammad will also go on to say as well in Sahih al-Bukhari 1462 that most of the people who will end up in hell are women because they are ungrateful to their husbands and deficient in intelligence and in religion. And he would also go on to say that they could even lead the most cautious wise man astray. He says too in Sahih Muslim 2740 that I have not left after me any chance of turmoil more injurious to men than the harm done to men because of women. Oh boy. Well, so far we're not off to a great start. But what about marriage? Do women have any advantage there? Well, not really, no. In chapter 4, verse 3 of the Quran, it says that a man can have up to 4 wives and an unlimited amount of sex slaves. And according to chapter 4, verse 24, these sex slaves could even be married, and you could still have sex with them. In Sunan Abu Dawud 2155, it talks about how after a battle was won, the companions of Muhammad took many women captive, but they were reluctant to have sex with them since they were married. But this is when Allah sent down the verse allowing them to have sex with them even though they were married. So the man can have multiple outlets to pleasure himself, even if it is through having sex with married women, as long as you own them. And to make matters worse, women could even be prepubescent child brides, according to chapter 65, verse 4, where it talks about how long a man must wait to have sex with a woman after she is divorced. And it says that for the one who hasn't had periods, i.e. prepubescent, that their waiting period is 3 months like the others. But if a prepubescent girl is getting divorced, then that means that she was married, which also would imply sexual intercourse in that time frame. But don't take that from me. Muhammad in Sahih al-Bukhari 5133 married Aisha when she was 6 years old and consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. And then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. until his death. So if you're a woman in Islam, you can be potentially one of 4 wives or one of an unlimited number of sexual partners to your husband, and you could also be a child bride. How exciting. But does the woman have the ability to be with multiple men? No, not at all. So this seems to be a very one-sided deal. And not only that, but one of the main purposes of women is to fulfill the desires of her husband. It says in Jamia Tirmidhi 1160 that when a man calls his wife to fulfill his need, then let her come, even if she is at the oven. And in Sunan Ibn Majah 1853, it says, no woman can fulfill her duty towards Allah until she fulfills her duty towards her husband. If he asks her for intimacy, even if she is on her camel saddle, she should not refuse. And then in Sunan Abu Dawud 2141, when a man calls his wife to come to his bed and she refuses and does not come to him, and he spends the night angry, the angels curse her till the morning. So if you don't fulfill your husband's sexual desires, then you cannot fulfill Allah's duties and the angels curse you. And not only this, but a woman's salvation is highly dependent on her husband's pleasure with her, as it says in Sunan Ibn Majah 1854, that any woman who dies when her husband is pleased with her will enter paradise. But to further prove this point of women being there to fulfill men's sexual desires, it says in Sahih Muslim 1403a that Muhammad saw a woman, and so he came to his wife Zainab as she was tanning a leather and had sexual intercourse with her. He went to his companions and told them, the woman advances and relies in the shape of a devil. So when one of you sees a woman, he should come to his wife, for that will repel what he feels in his heart. So Muhammad was lusting after a woman, And he was so unable to control himself and his sexual desires that he immediately had to have sex with his wife so he could release this desire. And his reasoning for all this is that a woman takes the form of a devil, which implies that her existence is tempting, and his wife had to be there to fulfill this need since he wasn't able to control himself. So, because of Muhammad's uncontrollable sexual compulsions, all men must follow in his example and women must comply. What a mess. But this also is one of the main reasons why women are to conceal themselves, as we see in the Miskat al-Masabih 3109, that a woman should be concealed, for when she goes out, the devil looks at her. And in a footnote in this hadith, it says, the basic idea is to lift up the eyes to look at something. Here it is explained as meaning that either the devil makes her attractive to men, or that he looks at her to seduce her and to seduce people by her. And this is why we see in the Quran in chapter 24:31 and then in 33:59 that when believing women go out, they are to cover their bodies entirely except an opening for their eyes, and the woman's husband or close relatives that she wouldn't be able to marry can be seen without can be seen without this covering. And by doing so, the woman won't be able to tempt other men over her looks. So in Islam, since men can't control their sexual desires, women must completely cover themselves head to toe so no one can see her body. That's pretty extreme if you ask me. But if that wasn't extreme enough, in chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran, it says that good women are the obedient, guarding in secret that which Allah hath guarded. As for those from whom ye fear rebellion, admonish them, and then banish them to their beds apart, and scourge them. So if you fear your wife is getting out of line, then you have the right to beat them if it gets that far. Now, some tafsirs and hadiths may give the impression that this is just a light beating, not causing severe harm. And even if that is true, beating them and causing any harm is a problem in itself. But other hadiths give a different story of the severity. It says in Sahih al-Bukhari 50:25 that Aisha said that the lady came wearing a green veil and complained to her of her husband and showed a green spot on her skin caused by beating. It was the habit of ladies to support each other, so when Allah's messenger came, Aisha said, I have not seen any women suffering as much as believing women. Look, her skin is greener than her clothes. So a woman was beaten so badly by her husband that her skin turned green, and Aisha says how believing women suffer more than any other women she's seen. Aisha would even experience this violence herself from her father Abu Bakr in Sahih al-Bukhari 68:45, where it says that he struck her with his fist and that the hit was very painful. So I don't buy the idea that the beatings that were allowed weren't severe. And Muhammad would also approve of these beatings in Sunan Abu Dawud 21:46, where it says that women have become emboldened towards their husbands. He, the Prophet, gave permission to beat them. I don't know about you guys, but I was raised to never put your hands on a woman, especially a wife, and anyone who did was a coward. But in the beautiful religion of Islam, anything goes. Well, so far, living life as a woman in Islam seems pretty terrible. But what about the afterlife? Because it says in multiple places in the Quran and Hadith, there are many virgins for men to enjoy and deflower for all eternity. So much so that it says in Jamiat Tirmidhi 25:36 that they will be given the sexual strength of 100 men. But what do women get? Well, it says in Sahih al-Bukhari 48:79, they get a corner to sit in where the other women will be in the other corner so you can't see them, and they wait for believing men to visit and enjoy them. So they pretty much just sit there and wait for their husbands to make the rounds and get to them after deflowering all the other virgins. How amazing. Now, there is much more to say, but for the sake of time, after evaluating the Muslim sources, it is very evident that Islam does not, in fact, uplift and empower women. Actually, the treatment of women in Islam is honestly quite sickening and disturbing. And I pray that more women see this and realize that this is not how women are being treated, and that they can come into the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ where there is freedom.